Well, my friends, welcome back to Spot On with Link Lauren, a show where we're going to break down the calamities of Hollywood, the circus of Washington, D.C., and everything in between. We have so much to discuss today. We have to talk about Jill Biden. There's a new book out on how she's very power hungry, something we've all known and have seen for years. We have to talk about this major mistake the writers of the Sex and the City reboot made, and we have some other hot topics, but we have to start with an update on the Texas flooding. What's happening in my home state, as I told you guys on Monday, has absolutely had me gutted. I'm devastated. I saw some friends of mine back home in Dallas held a vigil for so many of these young girls, especially from Camp Mystic, who were swept away, who lost their lives. And so as of right now, Texas Governor Greg Abbott says that 161 people are still missing in Kerr County after catastrophic floods. The total number of fatalities so far is 109. Now, this entire community has been ravaged, but people all across Texas have been ravaged because they send their kids to this camp. There were so many young girls from across the state who were at this camp, innocent young girls. Some of them went to my elementary school. They may have gone to your elementary school, whether it's Bradfield, Higher, UP. And if you're from Dallas, you know these elementary schools. And so I pray for these families in their grief. That's all we can do at this point. If I speak more about it, of course, I'm going to break into tears like I've been doing the past week, especially this weekend, anytime I saw pictures of these young girls. So we're praying for these families, but someone who has decided to politicize this issue, because this is, of course, what the left does. They have nothing left but to politicize a natural disaster where young girls lost their lives in a horrific, tragic way. And that is none other than Jasmine Crockett. We actually have a clip of her discussing the flooding. Let's take a look at that.
So anyway, I just wanted to jump on because my heart is truly heavy for all of these families. The sad part is, I think that my heart is going to carry a level of weight that will continue to weigh me down as we have to continue to do our best to survive an administration that literally is against us. An administration that is doing everything, in my mind, to hurt us and not help us. And it feels like we're fending for ourselves.
So first off, Jasmine Crockett is trying to blame the Trump administration on this horrific, once-in-a-generation, once-in-a-100-year tragedy. That is not helpful to anyone right now. It doesn't help the families who are grieving. It doesn't help those who are still looking for their loved ones. And thank you. Thank you to the first responders. Thank you to folks like Scott Ruskin from the Coast Guard. Thank you to everybody, the civilians who are out there helping to locate these young girls and these missing folks. But Jasmine Crockett, to make this number one about yourself and your feelings, to say, I feel this and I feel that, is absolutely insane. I don't know what you're doing. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that you are a congresswoman from my home state of Texas, and everybody I meet from Texas, they're embarrassed by you as well. In fact, I think Brandon Gill is the rising star in Texas, who we absolutely love, and Jasmine Crockett is nothing but a joke. But Jasmine, to try and blame the Trump administration for the water level rising in a way we have not ever seen before in probably 100 years just shows how uncouth and how uneducated you are. I know you say you have all this formal education and you passed the bar. I can't tell if you passed the bar or if you were drinking at the bar. Maybe you sat at a bar one time and think that you're a lawyer. But no, that video was absolutely insane. Something else that stuck out to me from that video of Jasmine Crockett is that she's sort of doing this more demure voice. Jasmine Crockett, normally when she's on camera, she's like, these mofos, crack-a-lack-a, jack-a-back-a. Now she's on camera trying to be all somber and reserved and put on this new persona. Why does she change her persona every time the camera comes on? She's a different person, right? She's a chameleon. And it's because she has no identity except Trump derangement syndrome. So shame on you, Jasmine Crockett, for trying to politicize the issue. No one needs to blame anybody right now. We need to find these young girls and we need to rally around these families who are grieving. I know my church back in Dallas, they've been holding events and they've been having, services for people who can come, especially therapy, all those types of things for these communities that are reeling from this tragic, tragic event. So Jasmine Crockett, shame on you. But President Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump will be traveling to Texas on Friday to survey the damage. I always love when they step out and they interact with these folks and they help them in their grief. First Lady Melania Trump is incredible at that. We saw that in California about 6 months ago after the fires. They went and it meant so much to the people to see the president of the United States show up. And it's a stark contrast to Joe Biden, who wouldn't show up in Hawaii for a very long time after their fires, after their disasters. But President Trump, he shows up, and showing up is half the job. And so I'm excited to see President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump head to Texas on Friday. But we have to move on to a woman who's probably the most power-hungry woman in politics, and that is none other than Jill Biden. Former First Lady Jill Biden, you might remember her from her horrific outfits. You know, she was wearing a leather skirt and stockings and leather black booties. She was doing this like geriatric hooker look. Jill Biden, she is being talked about in this new book, and it's getting all types of reviews online. Let me read you a little bit about this book. So the book is called 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost America. Now, the book's written by a bunch of folks from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, and they talk about how influential Jill Biden was and how insulated she kept the president. Now, we've known this for years, right? We didn't really need a book to see this, because what type of woman pushes her husband out on stage in that debate to humiliate himself? And I've said this since last summer. What kind of woman pushes her husband out there to humiliate himself in front of the entire world? So shame on you, Jill Biden. If you were a real woman and you really loved your husband, you would have said, you know what? You're not doing well. It's time to pack it up and go home so you can have some semblance of a legacy. But nope, Jill Biden, she's power hungry. So let me read you a little bit more. There was a near total ban on discussing Hunter, the journalist wrote in their new book, as Hunter's federal trial fell into the middle of Biden's reelection campaign. I believe that, probably did do a moratorium on Hunter discussions. Now, just as Jill jumped to Hunter's defense during the trial, she became the president's staunchest supporter following his disastrous debate performance against President Donald Trump. Now, the book alleges that she played the role of the protective spouse, encouraging the president to eat vegetables, keeping him on time, and questioning staffers when she felt they erred. Now, Jill Biden, I'm reminded of this clip after that horrific debate where she said, "You did so good, Joe. You answered all the questions." She really acted like this little school teacher. Why does she have to remind the president to eat his vegetables, to go potty, to drink water, to have his milk? Does he need a binky and a pacifier? That's who Jill Biden is, and it tells us what type of dire straits we were in the last 4 years. I mean, Jill Biden was running the table at these cabinet meetings. She was sitting behind the desk on Air Force One. She was effectively the de facto president. She was pulling the puppet strings, and she just wanted to get to election day and try to get Joe Biden over the wire. But the American people saw through all the BS and the lies, and they said, we've had it. We're not doing this anymore. We're not going to have a brain dead zombie president, okay? I think Joe Biden would have been like 89 or 88 at the end of his second term, something crazy like that by January 2029. No. Joe Biden could not do a second term. He couldn't do the first term, but he was insulated by all these shadowy figures and these unelected bureaucrats who were controlling the auto pen. So Jill Biden, she's power hungry. Now, the authors described how dropping out was not even a consideration at Camp David, and how the First Lady was part of those in the inner circle who persuaded Biden to stay in the race despite mounting pressure from party leaders and donors to step down. Now, Biden also acknowledged he needed more sleep and said he told his staff that he should not participate in events that start after 8 p.m. Well, that was probably your issue with the debate, because I think the debate started at 9. I was in Philadelphia that night for the debate. I think it started pretty late at 9 o'clock. But his message was clear. He was staying in the race. Now, they say Jill Biden is the protective spouse. Jill Biden, she's going to protect her husband, and she's been by his side for decades. For me, if you were a protective spouse, you would have said, come home, be with your grandkids, be with your children, be with your, derelict son, Hunter. Come on home. Baby, please come home. No, he should have come home. You know what I'm saying? But Joe Biden pushed and pushed and pushed him to stay in the race because she is power hungry. So Joe Biden, shame on you. You're gross. I want to hear from the women out there. Would you allow your husband, if you were First Lady, to continue pushing and pushing when you know he's cognitively impaired, when you can tell the guy is not doing well, when Joe Biden is giving speeches and he's calling out to people in the crowd who no longer exist? That's when you know it's time to pack it up. So Jill Biden, she's going to go down in history as one of the most unlikable women, one of the most power-hungry women, because she and Hunter pushed and pushed and pushed Joe to stay in the race. And it's also a national security issue. The fact that they knew he was not well, that he needed to eat his vegetables and be reminded to go to the bathroom, that's a national security issue with all the issues we have going on around the world. So shame on you, Jill Biden. Now, speaking of another woman I had hoped we would leave behind in 2024, we have to talk about none other than Miss Calamity Harris. Miss Kamala Harris, she's the gift that keeps on giving because she just won't go away. And anytime she opens her mouth, it's an utter calamity. It's a disaster. But Kamala Harris, apparently, she went on a podcast during the last election, during her short campaign, her 107-day campaign, and her podcast appearance was so bad they did not even air it. So this podcast was Kareem Rama's Subway Takes, and he says it was so bad they could not publish it. We actually have a clip. I want to look at that right now.
He emailed me.
They emailed, like an email from the
DNC.
Okay.
And they said, hey, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are really interested in being on your show. I said, that sounds cool.
Okay.
I'll at least get to tell my daughter that I met the potential president of the United States.
Yeah.
And so I said yes, based on the fact that it would be a good story, and also they both had good takes.
What happened with Kamala?
Her take was really confusing and weird and not good, and so mutually agreed that we shouldn't publish it.
I see.
And I got lucky because I didn't want to be blamed for her losing.
Her take was that bad?
It was really, really bad, and it was like didn't make any sense. I can tell you, it was bacon as a spice. Bacon as a spice.
Bacon as a spice.
Now, I am not surprised that Kamala Harris's podcast interviews were a disaster and that they were left on the cutting room floor. I do think you're kind of a partisan hack for not publishing the podcast. I don't know this man. I've never listened to the podcast. But if you have a presidential candidate come on your show and you don't publish it because you want to help them win an election, you are really not a journalist anymore. You're not someone we should be looking to trust. If I interviewed Kamala Harris and it was a disaster, y'all know I'd be rushing that out. I'd be doing next day, get that out quick. No, if you have Kamala on your show and it's a disaster and you don't release it, you're just a partisan hack. You're trying to affect the outcome of the election, and it still didn't work. You know, Kamala, she didn't go on Joe Rogan. The only big podcast she seemed to do was Alex Cooper's Call Her Daddy, which didn't move the needle because she was preaching to the choir that A, either wasn't going to turn out and vote anyway, or B, was already going to vote, right? There aren't a lot of Trump supporters listening to Call Her Daddy at this point because all she does is talk about her nether regions and how you need to be able to get an abortion on a street corner. That's what Alex Cooper and Call Her Daddy is all about. So Kamala was preaching to the choir. Why are you not putting out interviews that make the vice president look bad? She's in public office. If she can't handle a podcast interview, a little podcast interview, she should not be in charge of the nuclear codes. And that's what we saw. Kamala Harris, if she was too scared to sit down and do interviews, how should we trust her to be in the Situation Room at 3 a.m. during a natural disaster? And that's how I felt because remember, Kamala Harris didn't do a sit-down interview for 40 days. She did not do an interview for 40 days, which is unheard of in a presidential campaign. And then, of course, her first interview was on CNN with Dana Bash, and she had Tim Walz sitting next to her in a dark, dingy diner. The interview was also an utter calamity and a disaster. So Kamala Harris, she can't go off script. She's very bizarre. She's awkward. She's not relatable. The more she talks, the less you like her. And so they tried to do sort of the bubble wrap campaign they did with Joe Biden, the basement campaign. Let's keep Kamala Harris insulated, put out glossy, highly edited videos and tweets and posts, and hope that these billions of dollars we're grifting and raising can just move her through to Election Day and we can get it over the line. But no, it didn't work for Kamala Harris. She's back in California. Maybe she'll run for governor. Maybe she'll try to run for president in 2028. I hope that she does because the content will be incredible. She doesn't seem to learn from her mistakes. She's narcissistic enough where she thinks she's infallible and she's perfect and everyone else is the problem for her failures. So I hope Kamala Harris runs, but shame on these podcasters who interviewed the vice president and then didn't put it out because they wanted to impact the outcome of an election. If that were President Trump, they would have never given him the benefit of the doubt or that type of grace. So shame on you. Don't know who this podcast is. Kamala, not surprised your interview was a disaster because you are kind of a total disaster. Now the time has come to crown utter calamity of the week. This is probably my favorite part of the week. Utter calamity of the week goes to none other than Hakeem Jeffries. Y'all know him. He's one of the signature beta males in Washington, D.C., like Tim Walz, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Cory Booker. They're all a bunch of beta males. And this is beta male behavior, okay? This is beta male behavior. I'm going to tell you what happened. So Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, he has been called a massive clown for posting what appears to be a doctored photo of himself on Instagram. We have the picture. We're going to put it up. It's actually one of the most pathetic, sad things I've seen in a long time. So he shared this Instagram picture from Brooklyn with the caption, "Home Sweet Home." And he's leaning against a bench. And because he edited the picture, the lines on the bench are a little bit warped. So I don't know if he was trying to make himself seem skinnier or thinner or what, but you can tell that he edited the picture because the lines are warped. This is a dead giveaway. Now, the post has not been taken down, and I actually respect him a little bit for owning it. I respect him a tiny bit for owning it, but why do you need to edit your pictures to make yourself look thinner when you are a public official? You're a public official. Go out there. This isn't a beauty contest. I also think maybe he doesn't have any gay interns or any young women working for him, because I would have seen that right away. If you're going to edit your pictures and try to make yourself look thinner, allegedly, you can't have the lines on the bench going like this, squiggly lines, okay? So Hakeem Jeffries, you're an utter calamity for doing this with your picture. Why can't you just go work for your constituents? I also think Hakeem Jeffries and Cory Booker care way too much about looking cool. Okay? You are not in public office to be cool, to be influencers. I feel that way about Jasmine Crockett as well, and so many others. Even like the older woman with the purple hair, Congresswoman, I think Delora. Y'all care way too much about being influencers, and you should care more about delivering for your constituents, okay? You guys care more about posting these pictures and looking classy and fabulous. Why don't you care about delivering for your people? You know what I'm saying? All you do is spend time editing your pictures. So all I can imagine now is Hakeem Jeffries sitting at home editing his pictures. And if you remember, Hakeem Jeffries was doing his little filibuster. I think he spoke for like 9 or 10 hours or something. He wouldn't stop speaking. He kept going. And then Mike Johnson came out and was like, well, I'm glad that's over. And then we also had, remember Cory Booker, his 25-hour meltdown on the House floor? His 25-hour meltdown. Like, I think these Democrats in DC actually need therapy. Like, they're a bunch of overgrown theater kids. They're unhinged. They need to go to therapy, but somehow they end up in public life and we're left dealing with them. And I see that in Hollywood too. It's like, y'all actually are damaged, broken people, and you should go to therapy and do the work. But now you just end up in public life and we're all left watching you make fools of yourself. So Hakeem Jeffries, good for you, sweetheart, with your edited picture. Keep photoshopping, keep editing. At this point, you should just own it. You should just own the fact that you want to be an influencer and you're not interested in working. You and Cory Booker could actually go start your own little podcast and your own show, and you can edit your pictures and run off into the sunset together. So good for you. Congratulations on being utter calamity of the week. This episode is brought to you by Masa Chips. Now, as you guys know by now, I love Masa Chips. There aren't any other tortilla chips I will be eating in my house. In fact, I'm traveling over the weekend. I'm going to the airport very, very soon, in a few hours. Of course, I still have not packed yet, but I'm going to throw some Masa Chips in my bag to eat on the plane because that's what we're allowed to bring through security. So I love Masa Chips. As I told you guys, 4th of July weekend, we had some friends over. They fell in love with them as well. They're sturdier. They don't break in your guacamole or your salsa, and you feel a little bit healthier eating them because they have no seed oils, just organic corn, sea salt, and 100% grass-fed beef tallow. Masa Chips, they're beloved by tens of thousands of customers, and they've been endorsed by industry-leading health and nutrition experts like Ben Greenfield and Gary Brecka. You really need to give Masa a try, so go to masachips.com/link and use code LINK for 25% off your first order. That's masachips.com/link, code LINK for 25% off your first order. Well, my friends, I could not be more excited for this next guest. We have none other than Salena Zito. She is a world-renowned journalist. If you're from Pennsylvania, you know this one because she has covered Pennsylvania. She's basically the journalist from Pennsylvania, which of course was a very important state in this past election. Not sure why Kamala Harris chose a governor from Minnesota instead of the guy from Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. Maybe a little bit of a mistake, but please welcome Salena Zito. Salena, my friend, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. I'm so excited to be on your show. I think you do a great job.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to talk to you. We've been pen pals a little bit on X. I can't wait to have you come back sometime and we can do hot topics and news of the day. I'd love to have someone to go over these news topics with, but we have to talk about your new book that President Trump is posting. I put it on my Instagram story. I put it on X. It's called Butler, The Untold Story of the Near Assassination of Donald Trump and the Fight for America's Heartland. Now, this book is not just about July 13th in Butler. Of course, the anniversary of that is coming up on Sunday. It's also about this movement that President Trump tapped into, speaking to the forgotten men and women of this country. Something I wanted to talk to you about. For years, President Trump has been called, a billionaire from New York City. He's one of the elites, but yet he speaks to these men and women who have been looked over by the Democrat elites for years. He cares about the working class Americans. So tell me why you think he's been able to tap into these folks.
So President Trump, the first time I interviewed him way back in 2016, I watched him. It was at a Shale conference, right? And there's all these C-suite people there.
Yes.
And then after the interview, he's like, come on, take a walk with me. And we go around the back to the back of the convention area. I'm watching him talking with the janitors, the electricians, the caterers, the plumbers, and watching that interaction and that curiosity that he had with them. And I said to him, you seem way more comfortable with them than you do with the elites. You want to tell me what your story is? And he said, I'm from the outer borough. If you know anything about New York, if you're not from Manhattan and you're not old money, you are not given a key to the city. You are thought of as less than. So I punched my way up, but I also spent most of my career with the working class. I was on the construction sites. I was making sure everything was going right. Those are the people that I grew to respect. That's the important word. To trust, to do a good job, to show up to work and be present when they're at work. And I always respected their love of family, like Sunday dinners and, community, doing things like Rotary clubs. It's like, I just respected the heck out of them. And so I felt more of an affinity to them than I did to this elite, even though I wanted to keep being successful, right?
Absolutely. No, I'm reminded now, I think last year I went on a tour with some friends and some other journalists, and we drove to Queens to visit his childhood home. And you see these modest, humble beginnings, and you can imagine looking into Manhattan and looking at the skyline and saying, okay, I want to be a part of that. I want to be where the action is. I want to take what my father has done and built on it. And he turned himself into this huge business maven, which I think is the American dream and an American story.
Yes, it is. And what's even the nuance that's missed is that he was going to be disruptive to the system. Now, that was his personal goal, to disrupt the system and hit these goals, right? And he took that way of thinking and he put it into American politics. He also put it into Hollywood. Right? Like anything he did, he didn't do it to be just like everyone. He did it to disrupt a system that he believed was rigged and controlled by the elites, the people that live in the super zip codes in this country that often control I call them our cultural curators in academia, in legacy media, in corporations, in Hollywood, right? He believed that they were making decisions that benefited them and everyone's cocktail party that they were invited to, but not the people who were buying their tickets to go to their events or sending their kids up to their schools or reporting on them as journalists.
Absolutely. And one thing I love about President Trump, and it speaks to what you said in the beginning, when he's sitting around with his advisors, he might ask, hey, what does the janitor think about this? What do you think about this? He might have a super high level policy person, but he wants a cornucopia of ideas. And that's what I've heard from so many people who work with him. Have you heard that as well? If you're standing around, he might ask you what you think.
So I have been in the room, as they say. So I have actually seen him do that. I've actually seen him just poll people, regular people. It's a big discussion about something big that impacts the country. And he says, well, what do you think about that? And one of the things that hurts, whether you're the head of a corporation or the head of a country, if you surround yourself with people that are the same as you, who are going to tell you you're awesome all the time, you're not going to be a very good leader. He recognizes that, and that's why he puts all kinds of voices in the room when he makes decisions.
Absolutely. And some of the people who are even working in the administration, they don't have a long history in politics, but because they're great at what they do and they're loyal and he trusts them, he's like, come on. And that's sort of like how I ended up on the Kennedy campaign. I was making videos about this guy, RFK Jr., and they called me and said, would you want to meet him? I said, absolutely. Can I have a job? And so I think that's what I love about these folks who are really successful is that they don't care if you have this perfect resume and this long resume. If you have something to offer and you're smart and hardworking, they respect it. But in the interest of time, I would be remiss if I did not ask you about your day in Butler. And I even feel weird bringing it up because I imagine it's partially traumatic. I know you were there with your daughter, with your son-in-law. Tell me, without giving too much away from the book, what's your most salient memory from being there in Butler on the ground on July 13th?
I think the thing that stands out to me is, first of all, when I get there, it's very joyous. If you've ever gone to a Trump event, they are. It's like a Jimmy Buffett concert without the Hawaiian shirts and parachutes, right? Instead, people are in patriotic gear and red hats. And so that is always a constant. But, you know, I watched President Trump. I wasn't supposed to be in the buffer. And President Trump wasn't supposed to do what he did. And Corey Compatore, the man that lost his life, he wasn't supposed to be sitting where he was. But you know, I'm watching him come out on the stage. I talked to him 4 minutes before he walked on the stage. 4 minutes. Wow. He wanted to say hi to me because I was going to fly to Bedminster and interview him on the plane. That's why I'm standing there. That's not where journalists stand. Photojournalists do, but not reporters.
Right.
And so I'm standing there. I had sent hi to him. He always says the same thing when he sees me. Salena, you have the best hair in America. and I always think, yeah, no, when they're getting
it's thick hair, okay? I need to take my biotin, my Nutrafol. You have me thinking I need to amp up my game. We'll get to your hair in a second, but I'll go back to your story.
So I only talked to him 4 minutes before. I get put in the buffer because now I'm going to go on the motorcade and go on the plane. So they tell me to work my way around. That's why when you look at the cover, my daughter took that cover shot because we were following President Trump out there in the buffer, which is like a well that goes around the stage. And I remember getting off to the side because, you know, I obey. They told me to go to the side and be ready. So I was ready. And he does two things that he never does. Never. He puts a chart down. And I turned to my daughter. I remember saying this. What is he, Ross Perot now? Because Ross Perot was famous for his charts, not for his personality, but for his charts. And then he turns his head. Now, if you've ever gone or watched in detail a Trump rally, the president and the rally attendees, it's a very transactional relationship. They feed off of him, he feeds off of them. So for him to turn his head was nothing he's ever done before. And he does. And it's that is when the 4 shots go over my head. And I see him grab his ear. I see the blood streak across his face. And I see a sea of navy blue suits just surround him in a protective stance. And then there's 4 more shots. I'm still standing. At this moment, I'm not thinking about myself. I'm thinking about 2 things. Is the president okay? And dear God, don't let anybody be hurt in the stance. And so that really stands out to me that day. And I think it's important to say, President Trump called me the next morning, called me first thing the next morning. And he said, Salena, are you okay? Is your daughter okay? Again, my daughter was a photojournalist taking the photos. And I said, and he goes, I'm so sorry about, I didn't get to do the interview. And I did something that my parents, when they read the book, are going to be so mad at me. It's more like a truck driver because it's like, Mr. President, are you bleeping kidding me? Like, you were just shot. I'm not worried about an interview. And thank you for thinking of me. We went on to have 7 very powerful interviews that morning. That also stands out to me. And I think the thing that stands out the most, and it's a common thread throughout the book, and it makes you understand what continued to happen in that election that people didn't see and people didn't understand, and what continues to happen today, is that he told me when he said fight, 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 was not because that wasn't me. That wasn't about me. That was about, I am a former president. I might likely be a president again. I have a duty and an obligation to promote, to show strength, to show that we are resilient, that we have grit, that we are exceptional. We live up to those ideals. I also knew if I didn't do that, the people behind me would panic. And there was possibly people watching that would panic.
Absolutely. The word grit is one of my favorite words in politics. I think Bobby has it. I think President Trump has it. There are a few other folks in the administration who really have that grit and that character and that resolve. And when he got up and he said, fight, 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 no one has ever looked cooler or more badass in American history ever. And I think it's one of those moments we all remember where we were. I remember I was at home watching, and you're like, what's going on? What's happening? And then you're thinking of the people there. I mean, when he got up and said, fight, 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 that is when I knew this man is going to win in November, because Joe Biden, Kamala Harris cannot compete with this, Salena.
Yeah. And you know what people missed after that is how much it changed the American electorate. And even with, so that happens, the press, my profession that I'm embarrassed to say that I'm part of at times, immediately forgot it because Biden drops out. And then Kennedy is shortly after named gives his endorsement. That was also a game changer, especially in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio. Why? Because of suburban mothers. Suburban moms heard what he was saying. They listened to what he was saying. They are skeptical of the government. Their children were kept back. Their children were impacted health-wise, but also mental health-wise by what happened during COVID. And that galvanized women in a way. I remember writing about it and people giving me crap about it, saying, that's not true, you're lying. I'm like, no, like I'm interviewing women. And I also saw suburban women right after the President Trump was shot who put on the red hat, who in college educated suburban women. And people said, and I asked them, it's in the book, why are you doing this? And they're like, hey, he took a bullet for me. I can definitely wear a red hat.
Totally. I definitely think this Maha MAGA coalition was super helpful in this election. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but something you and I haven't spoken about is on January 20th, 2024, a few days after the Iowa caucus, I sent an email to Bobby and all the senior staff, so Amarella's his daughter-in-law and some of the other people, and I said, we should endorse President Trump. Let's try and get a seat at the table to tackle chronic disease and health and all these things. And I'm not going to go into my private discussion with Bobby about that. He was open to the idea then, but it just took about 8 months for it to come together. I thought it might come together in Milwaukee at the RNC, and it didn't, but it finally came together. I think also one of the most iconic moments in Arizona in August, that endorsement coming out to the Foo Fighters song was just incredible.
It was incredible. And y'all took out the wind of Harris's convention because you did it on Friday. And they're talking about Harris, and he walks out, and I'm like, my profession does not understand this moment. And it's profound and it's important.
They didn't understand it. And I think the mainstream media and a lot of these left-wing journalists, they realized once and for all in this election, I think some still haven't, but a lot of them realized, oh, we don't actually have that much influence. Because for us on the campaign, we could barely get booked in mainstream media. They wouldn't give us live interviews. And so we would do TikTok videos. You know, I was writing scripts for TikToks because I was like the TikTok guy. And we were just trying to circumvent the mainstream media. And you realize now you look at the ratings on networks like MSNBC, they're not talking to anyone. They're just really not talking to anyone. So it'll be interesting to see into the midterms in 2028 how everything plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that my profession doesn't understand the durability and the strength of this coalition. That every time something is just a little off, it's like, it's over. Democrats are going to win. And I'm like, no, y'all don't understand how durable this is. You more so don't understand is how much you have lost these voters.
Right. They betrayed the trust of the American people when they spent 4 years gaslighting them, saying Joe Biden was this spry whippersnapper who was doing cartwheels in private. And we were all seeing with our own eyes that the man was non-compos mentis and was not well whatsoever. But the last thing I want to ask you about, because I know you're a busy woman, I heard you were on Hannity, you're doing so much media. I said, I'm so grateful to have you. I don't want to waste your time. Here. Thank you. I want to ask you, though, because something I've talked about a lot with my followers and other folks in DC is we still want answers as to how Thomas Crooks was able to climb onto a rooftop in broad daylight, why Kimberly Cheadle, the Secret Service director at the time, allowed this to happen. And then she made some weird statement at the time. I think she alleged that the roof was sloped a little bit and they couldn't put agents on it. What are your thoughts on Thomas Crooks? And do you think we're ever going to get more answers into what really unfolded that day?
So a lot of what was bad about that day was the incompetency and the decisions made by the Secret Service. It's just another layer of us not trusting our institutions to do things that are keep us safe, keep us protected. More importantly, in terms of the Secret Service, keep the president, the former president of the United States, safe. It was, and part of the biggest failure is so simple in that the Secret Service failed to stay connected with other law enforcement that know the Butler farm grounds, but law enforcement that know the trees, the water tower. They, this is their beat, this is their stomping ground, and nope, y'all aren't allowed to be integrated with our radio system. And I think it's arrogance and incompetence more than anything.
Wow. And I mean, I still want answers on Ryan Ruth, who was the guy in Florida at the golf course. I mean, there are just a lot of things we want answers on, and maybe we'll get some type of referendum on all of that. But I also want to play you a clip real quick. I've decided just to nix the next story and keep you around for a few minutes. Okay. I want to get your reaction to this clip from yesterday's cabinet meeting. If we have that queued up, let's take a look.
Marco pointed it out. I was going to leave the clock. So as president, you have the power. If I go into the State Department or Department of Commerce or Treasury, if I see anything that I like, I'm allowed to take it. Do you believe this? So I'm in Marco's. I see this gorgeous clock, grandfather clock, and there it is. I said, Marco. He didn't know about it. I had to read him the rule and regulation. I said, Marco, I love this clock. Look at it. It's beautiful. He said, what clock? I said, the clock that's in the other room is incredible, and nobody gets to see it there. Marco, I tried to talk him into it first, and it sort of worked, and then I had to use a little more. I said, I'd love to take that clock out and put it in the cabinet room. He said, no, are you serious? I said, Marco, I have the right to do it, Marco. And he said, all right, what the hell? So that's his contribution to the cabinet room. But it's, by the way, it's an incredible clock.
Are you loving interior designer President Trump? I mean, the man is a builder at heart. We're like redoing the Rose Garden. We're doing a ballroom. I can't wait to come do a little two-step Watusi in the new ballroom. He's now, painting things gold. He's taking grandfather clocks. I mean, aren't you loving this era of Trump?
Oh, yeah. I think, I'm glad you pointed that out because people get that. And sadly, my profession doesn't. But it's very humanizing. It's very funny. People have no idea how really hysterically funny he is. I mean, there's a part in the book where he's chasing me around with hairspray.
Yes. We have that picture. Let's put that picture up, actually.
He's literally chasing me with hairspray. He's like, come on, Zito, you want some hairspray? I'm like, no, Mr. President, this does not need hairspray.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I think President Trump, he's honestly a genius when it comes to so many topics, interior design, obviously foreign policy, domestic policy, being president, hairspray. I mean, this is a man you can kind of come to. He's like MacGyver. You can kind of come to him with anything. But I wanted to ask you, moving into 2020, as someone who's covered politics for years, What do you think is going to happen with the MAGA coalition moving into 2028? Does it get stronger? Do you think Vice President J.D. Vance is probably the successor to what President Trump is building? Are you thinking about 2028 at all?
Sure. I mean, what I do, you're always sort of forward thinking.
Yes.
You're always watching people. More importantly, you're always listening to people. And J.D. Vance certainly has the heart and the attention of the coalition right now. So does Marco Rubio. I mean, people have been really impressed with him. They've been really impressed with Vice President Vance. And so these are two people that definitely could keep the coalition together. You know, people often say, well, without Trump, the coalition falls apart. That's not true. American politics, and they'll see that in the book, American politics and our coalitions have changed. And they have changed in a way that's pretty profound, in the way that FDR changed things, right? The New Deal Democrats owned American politics for decades. This new conservative populist coalition, it has going to have the same impact.
Totally. I think they tapped into this populist movement starting in 2015 when he came down the escalator. I think J.D. Vance, I love Rubio. I think Susie Wiles loves Rubio. I would not be surprised if we see a Vance Rubio ticket. And even if you keep some of the other cabinet members intact, like Tulsi Gabbard, who knows? But I want to plug your book one more time because it's incredible. We got the PDF. I'm going to get my physical copy soon. The book is called Butler, the untold story of the near assassination of Donald Trump in the fight for America's heartland. The book is incredible. Even if you're someone who didn't vote for President Trump in this election, maybe you've come around to him recently, maybe you're not even the biggest President Trump fan, you might be apolitical, you want to read this book because this assassination attempt was historical. It was swept under the rug by a lot of these journalists. I don't know why they stopped talking about it after 24 hours, probably because it was helping him in the polls. But you want to read this book. I'm going to share it on my Instagram again. I will share it on X. Salena, I'm so grateful to have you. I want you to come back when we have more time. We get into some hot topics, some cultural woke stuff. We will have so much fun. But thank you, and have an amazing rest of your week.
Oh, thank you. You have an amazing week too.
We've all had days when skin feels dull, hydration doesn't stick, and energy is all over the place. No amount of water, skincare, or coffee seems to help. That's when Peak's Radiant Skin Duo came to the rescue, and it's been a game changer ever since. This doctor-recommended duo, trusted by experts like Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Jason Fung, and Dr. Will Cole, supports whole body wellness from the inside out. With over 15,000 five-star reviews, it's clear this duo delivers results. Here's why it works. Sun Goddess Matcha provides steady, calm energy throughout the day. No jitters, packed with L-theanine for focus and EGCG antioxidants. It supports skin clarity and gut health because great skin starts from within. BT Fountain electrolytes hydrate like nothing else. Even with plenty of water, many still feel dehydrated. The difference? Clinically proven ceramides lock moisture into the skin at a cellular level, leaving it plump, fresh, and glowing. Purity matters. Peak's quadruple toxin screening ensures all ingredients are free from heavy metals, pesticides, and mold. Just clean, science-backed hydration and energy. Say goodbye to fatigue, dry skin, and energy crashes. Ready for healthier hydration? Get 20% off plus a free frother and glass beaker here. peaklife.com/link. Again, that's peaklife.com/link. Now, something we have discussed a lot on this show are these woke remakes. Hollywood keeps recycling the same old thing. We saw it with Snow White and what they did with Rachel Zegler. Probably a casting mistake, a casting catastrophe, if you ask me. But something that's gone viral the last few days is this new Superman movie starring this handsome guy. His name is David Corenswet, and we're glad that he's handsome, he's suave, he looks great. Everybody's lusting over him on social media, but they've gone woke with this new Superman. They're making such a big deal out of the fact that Superman is an immigrant. He's someone who immigrated to the United States, to America, and I actually have Superman's background. So let me read you Superman's background real quick, okay? Let's find it. So Clark Kent, also known as Superman, has two primary locations associated with him, Smallville and Metropolis. He was raised in Smallville, Kansas, after being sent to Earth as a baby from Krypton. So technically, he's an illegal alien. Okay, if he came from outer space, Superman is an illegal alien. I'm calling ICE, I'm calling Tom Homan, I'm calling Kristi Noem to come and deport the new Superman. That's what I actually think we should do. But we have a clip of the director's brother, Sean Gunn, who also stars in the film, discussing this film.
It is exactly what the movie is about, I think, that like we support our people, you know? We love our immigrants. Yes, Superman is an immigrant. And yes, the people that we support in this country are immigrants. And if you don't like that, then you're not American.
Why does a children's movie have to make such a social and political statement? Can't you just do Superman? Okay, the guy's running around in spandex and a cape and, got a lot of CGI. Why can't you just do a film? Nobody needs this to be a political statement on immigration. We don't need to hear from these rich Hollywood elites who probably live in gated communities with full security details. We don't need them opining and telling us about what we want. We want criminals off the street. And if you look at all of these polls, deportations have bipartisan support. President Trump ran on deportations. We're doing mass deportations. We're getting MS-13 gang members, Trinidad Agua off the street. We don't need to hear about immigration when we're going to see Superman, but I imagine this film will also flop because it also looks terrible. I saw the trailer for the film. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen. I'm not really into all these action films, but why does everything have to be about immigration or woke or gender or trans? Like, why can't you just do a superhero movie? Why can't you just do that? We have to talk about the Sex and the City reboot and Just Like That, which I think most folks are hate watching. It's one of the worst shows I've ever seen. Well, this show made a huge mistake, so huge it's going viral on social media. There is a character in the show named LTW, Lisa Todd Wexley. She's kind of the replacement for Samantha Jones, for Kim Cattrall. She's a beautiful black woman with great style and fashion and, all this jewelry and all these accessories. Well, in season 1 of the show, she talked about when her father died. She says, when my father died, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. Well, then her father comes back in season 2. And then in season 3 last week, they just had a funeral for her father. I don't know how the continuity experts didn't catch this. The father dies in season 1. He comes back in season 2. You kill him off again in season 3. Maybe you guys can just kill him off every single season. This is a huge mistake. I don't even know how this happens on a multi-million-dollar production. We have a clip explaining what's going on. Let's take a look at that.
A lot of calls, Charlotte. My father died.
Oh my God. When?
This afternoon. He had a stroke out of nowhere.
I'm just a mess. I could barely keep it together in front of the girls just now. I was the exact same way when I lost my dad last year. I could see my rings literally shaking on my hands while I was trying to be so strong for them. It's hard.
I don't know how you do a show and you kill off a character twice. I don't know how that happens, but I don't think anyone is watching the Sex and the City reboot for the plot. We're just watching to see these ridiculous women in ridiculous situations walking around New York City in ridiculous outfits. But at this point, no one should take this show seriously whatsoever. I don't think they're ever going to be winning any Emmys, any Golden Globes. I think it's an embarrassment that Sarah Jessica Parker even came back for this. Are you that desperate for money, fame, and fortune? I don't know if the money is worth it. I actually think Sarah Jessica Parker could have gone down in history as a great actress, an award-winning actress. I think she has Golden Globes and Emmys. She's been in film, she's been in TV. Why did you come back for this? And how the hell in the writer's room did you kill off a character twice? And if they're going to say she has 2 dads, Okay, if you try to save this by saying she has 2 dads, absolutely not. And for the folks out there saying it doesn't matter, it does matter because there are great films and great shows that have great scripts that never get picked up, they never get greenlit, but crap like this gets greenlit and these ridiculous stories get told. What about telling a story about women across the country who are working hard, putting food on the table? What about an interesting story, right, that speaks to the forgotten men and women of this country instead of these rich, woke celebrities traipsing around New York City, and then the writers can't even keep track of their own stories. So good for you and Just Like That. But as for you all, we will be back on Friday here on YouTube with a little extra. We're going to discuss Harry and Meghan. I'm liking where we take a little break from Harry and Meghan during the week and we get to them on Friday. But I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your week. Please stay safe. Please kiss your loved ones. And thank you so much for tuning in to Spot On with Link Lauren. I will see you on the next one. Bye.